Liverpool is a British city of culture. It has produced some of the most well-loved and enduring cultural icons of all time. This is the city that gave us the world's most successful musical band. The music of John, Paul, George and Ringo is as loved and admired today as it was on the day it was recorded. People love the Beatles. But it's not just music. There is a second side to the city of Liverpool, and that would be sport. It has produced excellent players such as Steven Gerrard and managers like Sir Kenny Dalglish. That's it, the two things that Liverpool is famous for: music and sport. But would you be surprised to learn that there is a third side to the city of Liverpool, a third thing that Liverpool excels at? And that thing is science.
Now, so what is it now? 11, 7.99, 8.9. So that's what happens sometimes. When you get close there, sometimes it goes lower.
Today's episode of Mind of Steele is all about this chap. His name is Mick. Mick is a member of the Liverpool People's Resistance and also a founder member of the Merseyside Residents Association. Now, that might sound like a completely innocuous name for a group out to do all kinds of civic good, but it is actually an insane organisation dedicated to stoking paranoid fears about 5G and causing disruption in council chambers. That's basically what these residents association organisations do. And Mick is no exception. He is cut from the same mould as some of the other 5G nutters we've seen on Mind of Steele, people like Andy Osborne, who you may remember from many months ago. Mick believes himself to be some kind of citizen scientist, which means that despite having no experience, qualification, or even aptitude for any kind of scientific discovery, he is nevertheless going to take on that responsibility himself. He is on a one-man mission to expose the deadly danger of 5G in Sefton.
Okay, lads, what we're here for is a full council meeting. But the last time we were at one, they wouldn't allow my question, which is all to do with 5G. And the effect it's having on the ovaries of young girls and women.
Mick is the self-appointed spokesperson for those most precious and delicate reproductive organs, the ovaries. Now, you might imagine, though, as an older gentleman, Mick would be more concerned about a matter closer to home. And of course, I'm referring to the testicles, because as we know, as the male body ages, the scrotum loses its original tension, and those testicles eventually droop and sag, and therefore creating a more exposed target to those exotic rays of electromagnetic radiation from the nearby 5G transmitters. And if Mick were concerned about that, then surely he would make his protestations known. But Mick isn't the kind of person who campaigns for his own good. No, he is 100% all in to defend Our Lady's lady parts. And you'll see that in a minute. And I'm sure you are all desperate to know just what was this question that the jackbooted apparatchiks of Sefton Council would not permit to be asked in Bootle Town Hall.
It's in effect causing a total obliviation of the youth. Because if the eggs are harmed in their DNA, it's the eggs inside the eggs for the grandchildren of that child. They're knackered totally. So we're looking at a genocide, basically.
It's not so much a question, more an ill-informed, long-winded, rambling monologue about the potential dangers of 5G phone system radiation that may pose to an as-yet unborn woman, a woman who may not exist for 40 more years, a woman whose life is entirely in the future, who Mick may not even meet. But concerned he is. Mick has invested an enormous amount of time in the contemplation of this future woman's lady parts. And aren't you glad, ladies, aren't you thrilled that there are such men in our world? They're usually, for some reason, balding, middle-aged to elderly men who spend an extraordinary amount of time contemplating the precise configuration of the female reproductive system. It's almost as if we men know more about being a lady than actual women.
But there's something else come up, and it's to do with the amygdala that's in the brain. The 5G destroys the cells, breaks them down. So people's emotions, their ability to work things out will be getting destroyed.
Is it possible that Mick's amygdala, that is the cluster of neurons responsible for regulating his emotional and fear response, is it possible that strange and mysterious cluster of cells has become overactive or possibly underactive or maybe even entirely destroyed by the presence of the 5G radiation that he is so concerned about? And in this case, that might explain just about everything he says and does. His weird outbursts, his aggressively inappropriate behavior, his inability to comport himself with sanity and dignity in public places.
Now, it's down, it's all written down. If the councillors want to look at it and read it, they can. You know, I don't really want to cause a scene like I did last time.
And let's just have a quick look at the scene that Mick caused last time when he and the Merseyside Residents Association took it upon themselves to disrupt the proceedings of the council chamber. Is it any wonder that the council are not particularly keen to have them back in one of their meetings?
Before you start, I have some questions tonight, and it's more important than any other question. The children, young girls in this borough, the children, the young girls, get eggs or getting radiation by climate change microwave. It's a crime against humanity.
It's almost as if a deadly beam of electromagnetic radiation has somehow destroyed this man's amygdala, reducing his ability to work things out, which in turn has reduced him to the rude and shouting sociopath that we just saw trying to disrupt the council's important business. But even if we have sympathy for this man's deleted neurons, the loss of which has robbed him of his self-awareness, he's now unable to perceive that he has made a complete and utter buffoon of himself. Should this be Sefton Council's problem? I don't think so. But that lack of self-awareness isn't going to stop this man's one-man campaign to rid the world of anything that might put our ladies' ovaries in peril.
In the ovaries, there's 10 times the sensitivity of anywhere else, and we don't know why that is. No one knows why.
Mick is probably one of the most learned individuals on the subject of the human reproductive system's susceptibility to electromagnetic radiation, at least the most informed person in the pub where they were filming that. And if this Liverpudlian codger doesn't know the answer, then I'm sure absolutely nobody else on earth does, because he is the very pinnacle of Dunning-Kruger top left excellence. But Mick isn't just an expert in medical sciences. He's also a bit of a dabbler in the physical sciences as well.
You're allowed to have one burst of 1,000 microwatts, which is 1 megawatt. So all these girls are walking down the road and there's 20 megawatts coming at them.
This is all so worrying, isn't it? Imagine walking down the road, idly flicking through TikTok or Instagram, which is what I believe young people do these days, and only to be scythed by a 20 megawatt beam of deadly 5G radiation. And just to put this into perspective, 20 megawatts would be the entire output for one of these small-sized gas turbine power stations. So rather a lot of energy in a very small beam. And just remember though, these ovaries, they are 10 times more sensitive than other body parts, and nobody knows why. And if that isn't making you quake with fear, then maybe there's something wrong with your amygdala. But Mick is not the only amateur scientist who is concerned about this existential threat to our as yet unborn women's reproductive systems. If you thought it was just a bunch of balding elderly men who are up in arms about this danger, then you'd be completely wrong. It's also hairy, bearded men.
Regarding the installation of 5G masts. These things are dangerous. They are emitting dangerous amounts that are invisible of ionizing radiations, which are no good for anybody.
This is Ralph James. Ralph is a former candidate for Sefton Council, and had he been elected, he would have been sitting in that council chamber, the one that we saw Mick and his friends attempting to disrupt. And he wasn't elected, no wonder, because the kinds of truths that Mick wants to tell us are far too advanced, far too out there and radical for the kinds of sheeple NPCs that the Merseyside Residents Association are so desperate to uplift to the kind of consciousness that they have. Truths that they would tell, such as that apparently radio signals are ionizing radiation. You would not learn that had you attended the physics classes at the University of Liverpool, nor even if you had attended the slightly less prestigious Liverpool John Moores University. The only place where you can learn knowledge like that is if you had been attending the private tuition groups of Mr. Mark Steele.
I can cause ionisation right across the whole spectrum.
If you reach energy fields of over 13.5 electron volts in air, that can cause ionisation.
If I get enough photons in a beam, I can cause ionisation.
Right away down that spectrum. I can actually cause ionisation using sound.
I can also cause ionisation by multi-photon. Non-ionising radiation could cause ionisation with a multi-photon beam. It's about getting enough energy into to an effect ionisation. Polarization, the multi-photon ionization potential.
I can cause ionization in sound.
The mainstream is trying to censor brave truth tellers like Mr. Ralph James, the man who was almost councillor. He has an inconvenient truth to tell us, that the existential threat that will kill us all has nothing to do with the usual kinds of panic. It's not environmental collapse, global warming, pollution, acid rain, rising sea levels, war, or even an asteroid encounter. We are all going to be killed by 5G. We don't deserve good men like Ralph James. When he ran to be a councillor in the Sefton Central Ward of metropolitan Liverpool, he came 6th place. It's almost as if the people of that borough rejected him. They were unwilling to hear the inconvenient truths that he had to say. And all this time, our daughters' and nieces' ovaries were becoming radiated by the deadly 20 kilowatt beams of 5G radiation. And, sometimes I think that atomic death would be a swift mercy compared to the horrible future that Mick and Ralph James are trying to prevent, the societal collapse if the human species is unable to reproduce and we face a sort of elderly greying extinction. What a horrible future that would be. But fear not, lucky viewers. These brave men are striking back. They will not be so easily put down by the officials of Sefton Council escorting them out of that council chamber. They will not let the ovaries of our young and potentially unborn women go undefended. If you are a woman of childbearing age, or possibly one of the rare prepubescent female viewers of Mind of Steele, don't worry. There's a balding, middle-aged man who will stop at nothing to protect your genitalia.
Just in this corner, but a little bit easier. But over there, over on the corner, where them towers are, they go off the scale. They're 100 times more than that's recommended with these meters.
Mick is holding a Trifield TF2. It's often compared to a potato in terms of its accuracy. This is the famed instrument of EMF vigilantes all over the world. Whilst most scientific instrument makers strive to make their devices more accurate, more sensitive, more nuanced, the makers of the Trifield TF2 took an entirely different path. The most exciting thing about the Trifield TF2 is, of course, its sound effect, because this machine clicks and howls like a Geiger counter that's been taken to some kind of post-apocalyptic nuclear fallout hellscape. It's that frightening, and that fear is compounded by the rather erratic sensor that it has, a sensor whose readings fluctuate wildly at all times. This is the perfect device to inspire fear and dread. And that is why this is the preferred scientific instrument for a very specific category of researcher.
This is the Trifield TF2 meter. So this is your really high-end ghost hunting equipment. I mean, this is as good as it gets. So it detects magnetism, electricity, and radio frequencies. So all of which are important when it comes to detecting paranormal activity.
This is ghost hunting equipment. This is the real-world version of Dr. Egon Spengler's PKE meter. Ghost hunters love it because of the weird sporadic measurements. They can claim that when the reading fluctuates, and of course it always does, they can claim that those fluctuations mean what they want it to mean. In this case, perhaps the detection of some kind of spectral entity from beyond the world of the living. But remember, when Mick was using the device earlier, he mentioned this.
That's what happens sometimes. When you get close there, sometimes it goes lower.
The reading went down, and that could be because Mick was standing below the main transmission lobe of that particular antenna, or it could be that poltergeists are afraid of vertical poles. We may never know the answer to that particular mystery. But in the meantime, let's catch up with our friends from Liverpool's People's Resistance. And they are taking their protest to the people. And by that, I mean they are presenting a letter containing incomprehensible twaddle to their local MP. Except that the MP is not present. He's busy doing MP things in Westminster. The chap that they're actually giving this letter to is the MP's constituency assistant, who looks to be completely bored by whatever this nonsense the chap from Liverpool People's Resistance is trying to present.
I want to know what's going on. I've got this 9-document paper here, which is telling us that the 5G masts are not good.
Okay.
I mean, it's more precise than that, but at the moment it's not good. So I'm asking the likes of Mr. Eston, especially Mr. Eston, because he's my MP.
Yeah.
I want him to look into this, have a read of this,
Okay.
and get back to me and tell me what he thinks.
Okay. This is you, yeah?
But is 5G the real risk here? Is 5G really what these people are afraid of? The answer may blow your mind. It may tear apart the fabric of your reality and then tear those strips into even smaller bits, perhaps just tiny strings of reality, and then throw those strings of reality all over the place, making a kind of messy mess of reality strings. That's the kind of show that Mind of Steele is. And I have been dropping these kinds of truth bombs since the summer of 2023. So I don't know if there are any minds left unblown, but perhaps if you're a new subscriber to the channel and your mind is still intact, just take this as a warning. It might not be after what I have to say next. Because what I'm about to drop on you is so utterly maddening, so dizzying. It's as if you had perhaps stared into the many hideous eyes of one of the elder gods from the Cthulhu mythos, and strangely you had lived to tell the tale. You may be alive, but your state of sanity may be weakened. That's the warning I'm trying to give you. So please, open your eyes to the fullest extent. Stare at the screen, even if you would rather not, because you are about to be utterly chilled to the bone by what Mick has to say next.
Probably they don't know. It's money, probably, what we don't know. We don't even know if the 5G's on yet. And the readings I'm getting are 100 times more than you're supposed to take. It's a disgrace. and an abomination. And as I've said, it goes against the Nuremberg Code, and it's a crime against humanity.
Did you catch what Mick just said there? We don't even know if this thing is on yet. And yet, despite not being on, it is already exceeding the power levels recommended by the Tri-Field TF2 ghost hunting equipment's manufacturer by 100 times. This battle station isn't even fully operational, and yet it has the power to vaporize every single egg in Mick's as yet unborn great-granddaughter's ovaries. It's like a time travel death ray before it was even switched on. No wonder Mick thinks this violates the Nuremberg Code, and that is a set of ethical principles devised for conducting medical research on human subjects. It was developed during the trials of the Nazi doctors after the Second World War, and it's something that you would have learned quite a lot about if you had attended Mark Steele's university.
It's in breach of the Nuremberg Code. This is untested, unproven, experimental in breach of the Nuremberg Code.
Who encouraged them to breach the Nuremberg Code.
You know who these characters are for the Nuremberg Code trials too.
This technology is illegal, it is unlawful, it is in breach of the Nuremberg Code.
The lawyers are baffled. You know, the lawyers who allowed, you know, the Nuremberg Code. I thought we're getting rid of that. You see, the Nuremberg Code, it's an experimental waveform, it's in breach of the Nuremberg Code.
And that's why we need new Nuremberg-style trials, or at least that's what Liverpool's People's Resistance are clamouring for. Because unless you want your unborn great-granddaughter's ovaries to be fricasseed with a side order of fava beans, then this madness has to stop.
It's about to be turned on today. Now, I'm concerned, again, personally, I've got children who live in Crosby, you know, they're grown adults, but it's a concern. All this data is giving me a sleepless night, you know.
Okay.
And this is backed up by scientists.
Thanks to Mick and Ralph, we've learned a great deal about the existential threat that 5G poses to our prepubescent and younger female viewers. If that's the category that you identify as, then I'm sure you are profoundly worried by the astonishing revelations that you have just heard in this episode. And I'm terribly sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but that's, I'm afraid, the kind of show that Mind of Steele is. I just drop one revelation after another, and to hell with the consequences. If that's your idea of a good time, well, I'm afraid the show is about to end. But the party need not end just so suddenly, because there's a little thing called Mind of Steele Chat, and that is a sort of a conference where the aficionados of this form of entertainment may congregate and exchange links and tips about the individuals that you may have seen in today's show. For example, if you know of another conspiracy theorist who is promulgating all kinds of fear-mongering twaddle, such as the gentleman we just saw, then please provide that tip to me on Mind of Steele Chat. And it's on Telegram. What is Telegram? Well, it's a chat service not dissimilar to WhatsApp, but it supports very large public groups. And most of those groups are completely insane. It's like a haystack of madness, but within that haystack of madness is a needle of sanity, and that needle of sanity is Mind of Steele Chat. Simply install the Telegram application, search for Mind of Steele Chat, and you will find our conference, and there you may become one with the universe, or at least the 50 or 60 people who are regularly taking part in the discussion. And if that's not your kind of thing, well, screw you. I will see you in 1 week's time for another bizarrely misbegotten episode of Mind of Steele.